Oh, yeah, for sure. So I wanted to ask you about social media now that we're talking about it. It's played a huge role in popularizing, making things popular, from food to clothing, everything like that, certain trends. And when I was younger, it was like you saw a commercial for something and that's what made it cool. Like you would drink Coke, you would drink, whatever it was, you would chew Bubblicious. I don't know. You would get the Cabbage Patch Kid because that's what everyone was buying. And if you didn't get it, you were the loser. Now it's totally different and everything is made popular on social media. And it takes sometimes a influencer to make that popular. So I want to ask you, what are the trends that you're seeing within that? Like, do you still think that influencers make a big deal and create these trends? Do you think that's going away? Do you think it's dangerous? Do you think it's good for brands? Like, what are your thoughts on it as somebody who covers this?
Totally. I think that it is so huge right now. And I think that how influencers and where influencers are really gaining this dominance is super interesting. I
Mm.
mean, looking at Brandy Melville, that was peak Tumblr and Instagram. And that's why the brand really took off, is because it was able to find the way inside of these social media algorithms. I think because they relied so much on teenage girls, that it took off in a way that felt super organic. I'm not sure what is going to come next here. I think that TikTok right now is, to me, the biggest driving force on social media in terms of setting trends, kind of reaching this massive audience. Probably TikTok and Instagram are setting those, but I'm not sure what comes next. I think that well, I can actually speak about the business school take on this. I was
Mhm.
in class recently where we were discussing social media, and we voted like how many of you would be happier if Instagram didn't exist. And it was pretty much a 50-50 split. I like Instagram. I was fine with Instagram existing, but for the half of the class who said they'd rather have Instagram not exist, the question was, how many of you have Instagram? And the majority still have Instagram, even though they wish it didn't exist as a
Do
whole.
they wish it didn't exist because they couldn't figure it out, or
No,
like?
it was just they wish it didn't exist because it made them feel bad.
Got it.
It sucked up a lot of time. It made them feel badly about themselves. I mean, I understand those critiques, but I like Instagram because I'm nosy, and it's helpful for reporting. But these people said basically the reason why they're still on it, even though they don't enjoy how it makes them feel or how much time it takes up, is this fear of missing out. And I think that
Totally.
that's kind of become the most dominant idea around social media now, is like this feeling that if I'm not there, everyone is like hanging out without me. And I
Mm.
think back when I was in high school, that was something that was pretty literal, where it was like, oh, people are in person hanging out without me. But now I think that it becomes very digital, where you can see when people are physically hanging out without you online, but also you feel like you have to be totally tapped in at all times, or you could miss out on something. So I think that that's one
That's
of the
so
things of social
true.
media that is interesting to kind of grapple with. And I don't know the easy solution there.
And not only that, it's like, what are you missing out on by not buying it? So at
Yes.
least a couple times a week, I will get a package and my daughter will run past me and grab it. And I'll be like, what is that? And she's like, oh, it's from TikTok shop or whatever. Or this, oh, mom, it's a trend on TikTok. Everybody's doing it, which like makes it okay that all of a sudden my money's gone because she spent it all on some crazy thing that breaks in 2 seconds and they have to make a TikTok about it. It's like insane, but it is what they all do and follow. And for me as a parent, I'm like, oh, okay, she's finding things to do. She's an only kid. It makes her feel like she's part of a community, I guess. And all of her friends are doing it. And they're all on FaceTime getting excited about it and opening it.
And it's something where it's like, that's not that different in some ways than us growing up. Like there'd always be like
Yeah.
some fad where it's like, oh, I need a Beanie Baby. I need this. But I think
Right.
it just feels so much more overwhelming now, because it's like, oh, who are you hanging out with? But also like, are you up on what to buy? Are you
Yeah.
like doing this as quickly as possible? And it feels like the trends go so quickly. I
Yeah.
mean, some of this I feel like just makes me sound old, but I do think that there's a level of anxiety that's built in on social media around belonging that wasn't quite all encompassing in prior decades. And I think that that can be pretty harmful.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Okay. As a journalist covering the Well, I was going to frame this as the food industry, but I guess in any industry, what do you think has been the most surprising or underreported story that you've ever come across, and why do you think it hasn't got the attention it deserved?
Oh, that is such a good question. Let me think. A story, this is something I want to write more about that I touched on a little bit earlier. I want to write more about child influencers and the impact of that and the long-term impact of that. So if
Mhm.
anyone watching this has thoughts, please reach out because I think that that is something that it's been reported on, but there's going to be more and more stories on what growing up as a child influencer or just growing up in general on social media does to someone. And I
Yeah.
think it's not underreported because of people ignoring it. It's underreported just because all of these things are so new.
And
So,
I have a question. What do they
yeah,
do with their lives after? I mean,
yes,
if they've started young and then they get into their 20s, unless they elevate that to something else, like how do you turn that into a real job later in life? And not only that, I'm wondering if some of these people's whole livelihoods are based on complete fake numbers. You know, you
yeah,
can buy followers, you can buy all sorts of things. Then you get random people behind you that build you up. But does that house of cards fall at some point, and then you have absolutely no skills
yeah,
later on in life? And it's not even too deep into life. You're in your late 20s, and then it's like you've really lived a fake life. So that's my question for when you're
exactly.
reporting it.
I mean, we've seen so much with how media publications kind of like pivot because they're like, oh, we're getting all these views this way, or like, oh, we're getting all this traffic from this social media. And then something changes and then that just falls apart. And like,
Yeah.
that's hard when it's a media publication. It often leads to layoffs. But when it's one person's entire livelihood, like, I don't know what you do from there. And I think that that is something that is going to continue to play out for more and more people as being an influencer is seen as a career that people are trying to
Right.
win.
And also what happens when they've lived a life like Alex Earl, for example, or
Mhm,
something like that. And then they say something to get canceled.
mhm,
Well, what skills do they have to translate this into
right,
anything else as well? And were they educated enough not to say the things they said, or did they say them because they're an asshole? Like I don't know
exactly.
what kind of credentials they had to do their get readies with me and put on cute clothes that people send them for free. I mean, how does that make you a smart person? You're saying dumb things probably because you haven't been educated and lived a life filled with experiences to know what to say and not to
Mhm,
say. You know what I mean? So that's
exactly,
another
yeah.
question I
It
have
is
when you're
very similar to like the 90s child stars, I think, where it's these people would kind of be in their mid-20s and it'd be harder to get roles because the casting directors are like, oh, like you're too known for being a former child star. Like it's not a good
right.
fit. But then they're like, I haven't gone to college. I made money, but not that much money when you're living off of it every day. And I don't have a marketable skill now. So, like, what do I do? Where do I go from here? And I think
Yeah.
yeah, I think that a lot of influencers are going to face the same
Yeah.
questions.
And by the way, that's in any industry. I speak to athletes all the time who were
Mhm.
stars in their field and then they retire or they're sidelined because of an injury and they literally don't know what to do with their lives and they all become alcoholics
Yeah,
or whatever because they really don't know what to do. It's actually a terrible thing. And it shows you how important education is when you're a kid. I mean,
completely.
just having a foundation of something so you can have other things going on. And that's why people pivot into, I don't know, you see real estate agents who were reality stars or A-list
Mhm.
actors,
Yeah,
driving Uber cars at some point because
exactly.
they don't know how to pivot and it's all gone sideways for them because
Yeah.
they've been left in the dust in whatever way, shape, or form. Um, okay. And then my last question for you, I want to know, and again, I know you're on hiatus right now from working, but there's so many stories in the news right now. You must be freaking out that you're like not able to
Oh my
like
gosh.
be writing all the time and pitching stories. What are the current things that you're following? Oh, and by the way, before you answer that, you're in New York right now. What do you think, or what does everybody at Columbia think about Eric Adams being indicted?
My phone has been lighting up for this entire call and I have not looked at my text, so I
Sorry.
will see. I mean, the Eric Adams indictment is truly like that is a fascinating story, and I'm sure there's going to be fascinating reporting coming out here because we just have all the elements of a
Right.
true high drama. I mean, you've got the
You have him already coming out and saying that he's innocent and that it was all fabricated, and it's
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 gonna
insane.
be interesting. It's gonna be an interesting time. So, I mean, I'm very excited to be reading all about that story, and I'm a
Me
little
too.
bit sad that I can't be reporting on it myself.
And it'll be interesting to see if somebody has to step in, if Cuomo is going to come back, the beloved Cuomo who everybody canceled, and now will he be mayor again? I mean, will he be mayor?
It's
It'll be
going
so
to
interesting.
be out of control, I think. I'm really curious. And I mean, I hope, and this is always my hope in general, I'm like, I hope that this is an opportunity to have new, fresh voices with really innovative new ideas
Yeah.
emerge. We'll see if that ever happens, but who can say? And I think that things that I'm thinking about for stories, I mean, one of the stories I wrote at BI that was a little bit more low key or niche was about residential cruise companies, basically people moving to live on cruise ships for the rest of their lives. It's a space that's filled with a lot of kind of scammers and is just also incredibly impossible to make happen because making a cruise ship something people can live on permanently is very, very hard. I'm looking into that more. I think that there's some interesting stories there. I'm interested in.
I know someone who is selling that. So we'll have
Okay,
to talk because when
let's
he
talk.
said that to me, I was like, that is such a dumb idea. I don't get that.
There's
I
a huge market for it, but it's incredibly hard to make work.
yeah,
I think that there's a lot of interesting things happening in cruise industry right now that I'm
yeah.
curious about. And then I also, this is something super general, but I've been wanting to write more about family businesses. That's something that being in business school has made me think a lot about and kind of the inherent difficulties of working with your family. So
Mm.
I'm kind of poking around on some family business stories as well.
You should look into, and he's a friend of mine. I can set you up with him, but Alan Rosen, he owns Junior's Cheesecake and
Oh,
it was
yes.
family owned. And I think he had to buy out his brother. There was all sorts of infighting and he now owns it. He was thinking of running for mayor of New York
Yeah.
recently. Good guy, but like he has a lot of stories about running it with his family. So, but yeah, I think that's fascinating. And there are obviously bigger stories and there are smaller stories, but the stuff that goes on between a family is definitely there's a lot of drama to it.
Yes. It's hard working with family on like the smallest of ideas. So the biggest ideas I feel like
Yeah.
can be so weighty. Well, it was so lovely talking with you
It
about
was
all.
so lovely talking to you. I wish you good luck at Columbia.